Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of A Coffee with Chris. As always, brought to you in association with our charity partner, Big C, who help local people affected by cancer, and proudly sponsored by Hill Coaching Company, here to help you become a better version of yourself today. Now, let's welcome today's guest. I'm a bit of a fanboy of this guest, I have to say. Consultant at Olim, Eloise Leeson-Smith. She is a trained linguist with a unique approach to written and verbal communication. She specializes in helping close the gap between what you think you're saying and what's being received by your customers. Eloise, let's kick off with exactly that. How do you close the gap?
I think the first thing that you need to do, Chris, is realize that there probably is a gap between what's going on. So lots of companies out there think that they're doing comms brilliantly. And why wouldn't they? We're all hopefully quite natural communicators. It's very easy to then extrapolate that and think, well, I must be an amazing business communicator. I run my business, I know my business inside out, so of course I know what my clients want to hear. Often that's quite far from the truth. And I think what happens with businesses who are finding there's a gap, either they're struggling to explain what they do, or they are assuming that they know what their audience wants to hear. And so the only way to address that gap is to ask them, what are you here for? Why do you buy from us? What impact do we create? I'm a very firm believer that our clients tell us what we do, but we get to tell them how we do it. So yeah, that's definitely where I would get started on that conversation.
That's an amazing start, Eloise. I really appreciate that. And I'm so happy to be speaking with you because you are so qualified it hurts. You are a trained linguist. And what are the areas of language that perhaps people aren't focusing enough on or are perhaps unaware of in the business world, in the marketing world? I'd really love you to give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour.
So I think the first thing is that a lot of people sometimes confuse what linguistics is. And so when I introduce myself as a linguist, people go, how many languages do you speak? And I go, oh, actually, one, badly. But what I do is with linguistics it's the study and science of language as an entity. So how do we communicate with each other? How do I know that what I'm saying, Chris, makes the same sense in your head as it does in mine? And I think sometimes we forget, and some of the best companies out there do this already, but sometimes we forget that we can talk about talking. And we forget that we can have those kind of meta-conscious communication conversations and say, so how do we want to communicate in-house as an organization? What do we need to do to make sure that we are being as clear as possible, especially if as a company we're global? We have team members who span different continents and countries. How can we make sure that we're looking at asynchronous conversations and communications? How do we convey information effectively? And so with something like linguistics, what you get is a toolkit effectively that helps you have those conversations, but also consider where conversational communication breakdowns occur. And that's the kind of the bit that I like to play in, which is semantics ultimately, but looking at why do our customers not understand what we do? Why is my team member a little bit pissed off with me because of something that I said in last week's meeting? Is that a cultural frustration or was I just misunderstood? How can I write an email so that it inspires action from a bunch of people, politicians, who don't typically reply to collateral that they get sent? And so the areas of language that I think we tend to forget not forget or not look at. It's just about developing what I would call more of a consciousness around communication. And once you start to get curious about that, then it really is a rabbit hole that you can fall down in terms of what you decide to do and how you decide to do it to become a more effective communicator.
I love that. That's so interesting. So much wisdom already. Eloise, I want to kind of throw you in the deep end here. You came up with an analogy. Well, it wasn't an analogy, actually. It was a bit of insight from one of your recent sessions regarding how important language is. I could potentially be about to get cancelled here, depending on how you deliver this. So be careful, but fire away on that, because I think this might wake people up to just how important language is.
So I think what you're getting at there is I run brand workshops. So I run brand repositioning and realignment workshops. So typically for businesses who've grown organically, they've done a really fantastic job of that. But now they're at that very natural kind of growing pain stage of, we are more established as a business now. We need to grow up a little bit. And to do that, you often have to really think about, what do we want to communicate and why is that important? And so when I do those workshops, one of the core things that I'm building with the clients in question is what's called a sociolect. And a sociolect is a kind of language dialect, a social dialect that helps us understand that we belong to something. And so the way that I get my clients to think about this is, we're sitting in a workshop and I've got a photo of a TV remote on, the presentation screen. And I ask them, what did you call this when you were growing up? And I get a variance of different responses. I can have people say things like the clicker, the twiddler, the doofer, the thingamajig, the zapper, the Frank, after Frank Zappa. And recently I had a fantastic workshop where a lady said, well, I could tell you, but it's a bit rude. And I said, well, go on then, because I'd love to hear what it is. I'm always excited to hear a new term. And she said, well, my husband calls it the penis. And I choked. And then she said, and I said, why does he call it that? She said, well, he sits on the sofa all day and holds it in his hand. And I absolutely dissolved in front of this incredibly senior group of people. But so thankfully they did too. But it was just one of those things that it was obviously very unique to her household. It was very unique to their language as a family and a marriage or whatever. And I just thought, yeah, that's a word of belonging. And so when we think about sociolects in that sense, the kind of exercises really encouraging people to think about, why do these words mean what they mean, and how can we decide on that meaning together? So yeah,
that's the second time you've delivered that to me, and I laughed just as much as the first time. It does just really highlight the importance of this stuff, Eloise. I'm so conscious that in your world, probably even more than the social media world, business owners, marketing leaders, they might be, when they hear linguistics, language, they might think, oh, that's just kind of fluffy stuff that we don't need to worry about that much. But actually, it's so bloody important that people get it right. And so I really appreciate you sharing that absolutely hilarious moment. Obviously, in the world of social, one of the most important things is grabbing attention, and otherwise defined now in the social media world as scroll stopping copy. So what's your definition of scroll stopping copy, Eloise? And should that be the biggest priority for businesses and brands now / moving into 2025? Is it all about grabbing attention? What's your general take on headlines and things like that?
It's an excellent question. And there are a couple of different facets. So bear with me as I reply here. So with the concept of what is the purpose of scroll stopping copy? We are scrolling, we are taking in vast amounts of information all the time. The reason that you want to be scroll stopping is quite literally, it sounds ridiculous, right? But to stop the scroll. Because if someone flicks past your content and doesn't read it, everything that you did after the fact was kind of pointless. Now, that being said, scroll stopping copy is not the end of the game, because there is a difference between loud and shouty and attracting attention and being a trustworthy, consistent, credible brand voice. And so it's not just about interrupting someone's scroll, it is also presenting yourself as a trusted entity. And I think that is sometimes where the conversation is a little bit premature when we say, well, scroll stopping is everything, you've got to get attention. Attention's not actually the problem. Consideration is the problem, and a consideration span is becoming shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. We don't have an attention problem. If I can sit and binge watch vast amounts of Studio Ghibli on Netflix or an entire series of The West Wing, I don't have an attention problem. What I have is a consideration span problem, and we are being bombarded with messages all day, every day, more so than at any other point in history. And the human brain is not designed to, or rather the human brain is designed to filter out what is of interest. And so what we need to do is be interesting and value adding rather than just diverting, because consideration can be 0.5 seconds of time, and it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Someone else will have better metrics than I will in terms of the actual span of time that we give our consideration to. But once we get past that kind of gatekeeping moment, it's not just about stopping the scroll, it's about being genuinely valuable And that is also a fundamental part of the puzzle.
What a fantastic answer. I was hoping you'd say that, to be honest with you, because it's not all about grabbing attention, is it? You have to provide value. And this is often something that we, consult with various clients, is often they're doing one or the other. They're grabbing attention, but then just sending them away to a website link or not giving them what they need to know. Or they're so knowledgeable, they've got so much to share, it's so interesting, but they're not grabbing attention. And so it breaks my heart, Eloise, that then this content just goes to waste. I mean, you must see that with your clients or people in your network all the time, right?
I think there's, like you say, Chris, there's so much wisdom and insight and information out there. And I think that, our access to that accelerates all the time. And at some stage you hit saturation point. And so I think that, I get, obviously, like you, I think get naturally quite frustrated by seeing brilliant people get bypassed. But I think that, again, is also potentially slightly short-sighted, because what we want to do is not just present our expertise. What we want to do is help our customer figure something out, help a client solve a problem, help them do something better, make their lives easier, make them happy. And these things they sound really trite, but when we don't think about the other person on the other half of that interaction, it's like a crappy first date, right? So what we have is someone who's like, hey, babe, come out with me. Look at how fabulous I am. And he's there in his like velvet tuxedo, God forbid. And then we're sitting there on the first date saying, so did you know that actually I'm amazing at this and I have a master's from York University? And then you go, oh, he's just talking about himself. And you feel like an accessory, right? So for me, one of the most important things we can possibly do is think every single post, every single interaction, how am I inviting my customer or my prospect into this chat? And what am I doing to make them feel seen and valued and heard?
That is amazing. That is so good, Eloise. And I think it's a filter, it's a mindset switch that we should all apply. I crudely call it weeing everywhere. We're the best in the world. We will do this for you. And as soon as you change we to you, like that is a real simple step that people could take with their social copy to massively improve. By the way, not just speaking to their customers, but actually just improving engagement and response rates. And speaking of response rates, Eloise, I wanted to ask you about this, because this seems to be a very, very good skill of yours to rapidly improve response rates. So I'm quite intrigued to learn more about that from you, because you've got a real good track record of improving response rates for your clients. How can people do that, whether it's email, whether it's social media engagement? Are there any tips or tricks that you could share in this area for us?
One, I would love to, 100%. So the first challenge I'd like to give anyone listening to this is delete the word I from your emails. If you want a better response rate, take yourself out of the equation. And the reason that I would chat, and it is a challenge, it's really hard to do. When you focus on the word I in an email or outreach of any kind, and I have a bit of a sales background as well, so I'm always hypercritical. God, forgive me for this, but there are some sales reps out there who are like, hi, I see that you're working in the athleisure sector. That sounds awesome. What's that like for you? And I go, first of all, that's not what I do. And second of all, you've used the word I 14 times in your email, so I know where your priorities lie. And I think that removing I is a very practical, very difficult, and it'll be difficult in the start, but then, once you get a little bit, more familiar with it, you'll soon start to see just how impactful things are. The second thing is that mindset shift, Chris, from we or I to you, means that everything that you write from that standpoint is going to be inherently focused on, what does my customer need to know? What is the next right action that they have to take? And so your response rate will increase naturally, because rather than say, hey, I wrote this white paper about this thing that I think is really important, I think you should read it, and someone goes, no. What instead you wind up having is someone saying, like, I spotted that you work in this particular sector. You're probably looking at these things in the future in terms of your strategy. We crafted this report about this and this, which might be valuable. Would you like me to send it over, or is there a time to chat it over a call? And so you find then that by giving people options, saving face, that the response rate will increase because you've treated someone like a human being. I know that sounds ridiculous. Why should that be a USP? But genuinely treating someone with the kind of respect that you would like to receive, thinking about what's going to be most valuable for them, that orientation mentally, that perspective is going to mean that It influences everything that you write, regardless of platform, regardless of channel, it's email, it's social, wherever, even conversations that you have with people where you're focused on what do they need, what can I help them achieve, you're going to have a better response rate. And it's not just response rate, it's also sentiment, which is harder to measure. So with response rates, it's easy to track, right? So I got, 5 more replies than I did from the last email, that's great. But you're also, one of those things we can't necessarily measure effectively is sentiment. How do people feel when you interact with them? And it's that, I always quote Maya Angelou on this, and she said that people will forget what you said and they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
This is so good. I'm so happy I booked you in as a guest. But that leads me on to this, Eloise, really nicely, right? Is there a corner cut? Is there a blueprint? Is there a quick way of discovering the language that genuinely lands with a specific business's target market? Is there a way that you would recommend people do that?
It depends on what resources you have available. So for big businesses, you have Trustpilot reviews, Google reviews, resources like that. If you have an in-house sales function, you are sitting on a gold mine, my friend. But what you have to go and do you know what the corner cut is? Asking the question. So what you have to do is go to your reviews and say, so right, linguist tip here, we're going to build something called a corpus. Corpus is Latin for body, right? So building a body of research. All you're going to do is open up a Word document or a note app or whatever. And if you have reviews, you're going to go in and you're going to gather them together and you're going to put them in the Word document. Then you are going to go and find a word cloud editor of some kind, or something that will let you filter out the words that you are receiving on a frequent basis, and you're going to rank it from most to least. So you want to see, what are people talking about from an adjective standpoint, from a noun standpoint? How are they referencing what you do? You can be super old school and you can print it out and you can tally the number of times a certain word comes up. That's fine. But what you want to do is get a sense of how are people, what is the language, the vocabulary, the lexicon that they are using to refer to our service. That is not where you stop, that's where you start. So you begin with that to start building a picture of how do our customers perceive us. Then you go out and ask them properly. And what you do is you create a research script and you ask them very nicely and say, look, we really want to understand how it is that you see us. We'd like more customers like you because you're fab to work with. So could we, a bit of flattery goes a long way. Could we ask you for 25 minutes of your insights? We've got some questions here. Let's have a chat. And then you say, how did you figure out that we were the solution that you needed? What moment were you going through? Was there a time specifically that you thought, oh crap, I really need someone to help me with that? Did your expectation of us, did it align with the experience of working with us? And so you start to build out all the questions that you want to know. And then so you're taking those notes all at the same time. You're adding it to that corpus, to that body, and then you're ratifying. Does my hypothesis line up with the actual results, that I'm getting, the data that I'm getting from my customers? Then you take that and you say, right, now what do we do with that? We now agree this in-house. We build a sociolect. We get our TV remote terms and we make sure that they are family friendly. And what we do is we then decide that this is going to guide how we talk about what we do in the future. So it should underpin your strategy. If you have those resources in-house, if you have that sales function in-house, talk to your salespeople. If you have a call center, talk to your customer service reps. What are people struggling with? What are they frustrated by? What words do they hear time and time and time again? We are all filtering so much through our subconscious, but you have to ask the right questions to unveil what's already there.
Oh, blimey, that is so good. I am really, really interested in this, Eloise, and I think we're kind of getting into a space where we're leaning into, well, we are already in their tone of voice, and I'd like to get your tips on that in a minute, actually. How can I can take this in all sorts of directions, but let's go to tone of voice. Let's go to tone of voice. It's kind of linked to that. How can a business really tune into this next year? Because this sounds like it could potentially be quite large. It could be a large project, this, right? Or are there things that people could immediately do to make an instant impact regarding their tone of voice? Because so many people, and you know this, they're using jargon, they're using words that they think their mates or competitors want them to use, but not what their actual audience or customers use, right? It's crazy, isn't it? So are there things that people can immediately do here?
So I think it's less a tone of voice consideration, because tone of voice is the characteristics of a brand voice, right? It's what are the things that we want to. So Monzo has a fantastic tone of voice, right? Brilliant. It is friendly but never offensive. It is universal but never deprecating. It is warm but not sycophantic. So Monzo, cracking tone of voice. They are definitely people worth looking at if you want to nail what are we known for. If you want to improve your communications output overall, it's a slightly more nuanced question. And that then comes down to things like readability and accessibility. So you make an excellent point there around. So a lot of people like say, well, we are experts, or we are, an authority in this space, or we have, data, and we're very intellectual and we're very clever and we want you to know about it because then you'll be tricked into spending more money with us. And so what happens is that we mistake jargon and complex terms for expertise, and they are not the same thing at all. Yes, absolutely. You've got your boffins in universities who will use fabulous phrases that leave the rest of us in the dark. But if you want to be truly thought of as an expert, studies have shown that the more accessible and understandable you can make your communications collateral, the better an impact you're going to have, the more well thought of you're going to be. So coming back to that brand sentiment, which is harder to measure. And so what we find is that in the UK, in the US is wildly different, but in the UK, we have an average reading age of between 12 and 13. And that is not because people are stupid or that we are illiterate or inarticulate. It is because we have lots of speakers who have English as a second, third, fourth, fifth language. Britain is very unusual in that we are a largely monolingual country. If you go to Europe, you have people in France who speak French, English, Wolof, any number of different languages. Multilingualism is the global norm, except in places like the UK. The US, we have English as a lingua franca, yes, but Spanish is hot on its heels. And so you have almost a sort of a duolingual setup in the States. And in America, you have something that is called a low context version of English. So in language, we have context, we have low context, and we have high context. Low context means I don't need a huge amount of information to understand what's just been said to me. High context, like Japanese, for example, means you need a couple of centuries of a consistent culture uninterrupted by the outside world to be able to infer what's been said. So context in terms of language, especially if you're looking at a UK or a US market, the reason that we need to be as straightforward and as accessible as possible is so as many people as possible can understand what we have to say.
So one of the things I've taken from that is that businesses should, on the whole, really try to simplify their words.
Yes.
Is that a fair thing to say?
So this is another cool thing, Chris, is that simple and simplistic are not the same thing. Einstein himself said that unless you can teach what it is that you've learned to a 5-year-old effectively, you don't understand it. And so the hallmark of truly understanding something is making it, I guess, an invite to someone else to share in that learning by making it understandable, making it engaging, making it accessible. And so what I would strongly recommend everyone does, and you can do this on any AI tool you have, whether it's Claude, whether it's ChatGPT, whatever, ask it to test your readability. If you're even a little bit worried about your web copy or about your comms collateral or about your onboarding document for your staff, here's what you do. The prompt is, take this piece of copy, and I want you to give me an average estimate of the readability of this text. And so what will happen is there'll be certain linguistic formulas that things like Claude and ChatGPT, even Microsoft Word to an extent, are programmed with. And these are things like the Coleman-Lau score, Flesch-Kincaid, Gunning-Fogg index, and they measure things like number of syllables in a word, number of words in a sentence, number of long sentences together, sentence length from 0 to, obviously not 0, but so it's like say 3 to 15 words, 15 words to 30, 30 to 40. If you're writing 40-word sentences, have a word with yourself. That's just a bit much. And so what we find is that you can get an immediate picture of, actually, this is college level. Now, if you are looking at selling Boohoo clothes, you're not necessarily going to want to be at a college level for what you're doing. If you're working, so I did some work with the UN back in 2022. And one of the biggest things that we focused on for their climate arm was reducing the scientific jargon and vocabulary that was present in the collateral that they used. People need to understand what's the difference between a typhoon and a storm. So we wrote articles that were focused on grades 6 to 7 US English level, so that as many people who are reading English as a foreign language or a non-native tongue could understand.
What an amazing piece of advice there. I love the detail that you've gone into there, the steps that you can fundamentally take literally right now. I think that's amazing, Eloise. I'm going to start potentially a bit of a debate here with you. This is unplanned, so here we go. One of the things I think that us Brits struggle with is telling people to do something. And I've started to encourage people to actually get a little bit more, dare I say, American with things like call to actions, because no one's telling anyone to do anything on social media. We're kind of just giving all of this lovely help and advice and value, but yet we're not telling anyone to do anything. I just wanted your take on that as to whether you think maybe us Brits could maybe learn from American marketers regarding how we're communicating with our customers.
It depends who your customers are. If your customers are people who are going to respond well to that. Now, if someone tells me to do something, I'm going to go, no, just to be contrary. And so I think it depends enormously on what is it you would like them to do? What are you inviting them to do? How much value is there in that action for that customer? And so let's say, for example, an email, and it's not all Americans, not all Americans, not all American marketers. But I think the best marketers are the ones who understand the next step in the customer journey and the context of that. So if it's a case of being more direct, I think directness and clarity are often confused. Direct can be blunt, but being really clear about what happens next can be an invite rather than an order. And I think that to me is a very subtle difference between how do I make someone feel like this is something they want to do? What's the invite to action? And if you've written your content well enough in the post, the email, whatever, it should be a no-brainer. It should be a next step. And so let's give an example, right? So I write a ridiculous newsletter. My newsletter has covered everything from melted Maltesers to the state of politics on the world stage. It is just not, and it's purely a passion project for me. But what I haven't done, and I really should have done, is to say at the end of it, did you enjoy this? If so, would you consider sharing it with your friend? Consider, not asking you to, but would you consider sharing it with a friend? If you hated it, why not forward it to your enemies? And so what you can do is you can take a call to action, you can turn it into something that feels like a very natural next step. And we like to help each other. I think we sometimes forget about the sort of benevolence of the human nature to a degree. And I think that, some of the very best YouTubers, I remember Stephen Bartlett, whether you like him or loathe him, Stephen Bartlett, one of the very clever things that he does with his podcast when he was getting started was can you help me? We're trying to grow this podcast. Can you help me by liking and subscribe? Can you help me by sharing with a friend? And all of a sudden it's less about like and subscribe. And it's, could you help me grow my business? That's actually helped me. I think that's amazing, Eloise. I really like that subtle action there, right? No more CTAs, way more invite to action. ITAs, there you go.
Yeah, I think
you heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, no, I think you should trademark that. You should maybe trademark that. I like this. Amazing stuff. How have you made a difference for your clients, Eloise? I really wanted to kind of use this as an opportunity so you can really kind of demonstrate how you take people on a journey from A to B and how you've been successful with your clients. Because again, I'm just so consciously aware that people might think, Eloise is a nice to have. It sounds really lovely, but it's the same with me, by the way. Like social, it's nice to have. We can kind of do it in house. It's all right. So what's been the difference that you've made to an organization regarding their language, their words, the linguistics?
I think the biggest changes that I help clients make. So yes, there's all the practical stuff. There's, an uptick in sales because you've now got an email people want to respond to. So I did that for one of the big four recently. Targeted outreach campaign to senior financial directors. We saw a brilliant response rate from those guys, and it led to some very interesting conversations and a spike in sales. So there's the practical stuff that you can do. more importantly, at least from my standpoint, more importantly, the work where my work adds most value is helping my clients see themselves clearly for the first time. And I will give you an example. Do we have time for me to give an example?
Go.
Amazing. So I have the pleasure of working with a number of different accountancy firms, and it is a pleasure, I promise you. And maybe it's the only kind of creative accounting that should really ever apply. Anyway, a lot of the accountants that I work with often come to me and say, well, we know why our customers buy from us. And they buy from us because we are trustworthy and good with numbers. And I just sort of die inside. I go, oh no. But also I get quite excited because I think that's not why they buy from you, and you're going to find out. Because to me, if you are an accountant and you are good with numbers and trustworthy, that's kind of my baseline. If you're not meeting that, we're not even having a conversation. So that it should be a given. And I did some work with an accountancy firm who look after clients up and down the country and internationally. And one of the things that I asked them to do, again, during that brand workshop that we do with the TV remote and everything, was to talk to me about what guides the work that they do and why. And we found that actually they had these values, the values that they thought they had, trustworthy and good with numbers, were actually far more powerful than they even thought of for themselves. And so what we found was that they had 5 values, which were being accessible. The first thing that they wanted to be was they didn't want people to be intimidated by the world of finance and accounting. So they really focused on the accessibility of their terms, their jargon, their concepts. How can we help our clients to better understand what's going to be asked of them when 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗀 tax time rolls around? And that accessibility was informed by the care that they had for their profession, for each other as a team, and for their clients. And because they had created a standard of care, they were able to then filter that into being trustworthy. If someone cares about you, it's much easier to trust them. If you can see that they care about you and they want you to do well, it is so much easier to trust them with the gory details of your accounts at the moment, right? Which enables them to do work that's excellent because you're addressing the core problem, rather than worrying about, is this something I can actually bring my accountant in the first place, and letting it fester. The excellence then translated into profitability and what they called prosperity. And so prosperity wasn't just, we've got more clients. It was our clients are prospering. Yeah. Our clients have more money and more time to be able to do the things that make them great at their business. And then they can pour into their community. So it's prosperity for the firm, for the clients and the community. And then that filtered right back into the accessibility. We've made prosperity accessible. And that is a world away, Chris, from being trustworthy and good with numbers.
Yes.
The impact for this firm was that they then stopped and thought, our work's really important. Oh, wow. They were motivated. They were excited to talk about what they do. It turned content creation from this great big behemoth about like, how do I do my year-end accounts, into I get to tell people how to do their year-end accounts. And so the motivation, the mindset shift, the paradigm shift of it is huge. That's where the value really lies.
I think that's an incredible example, and hopefully people watching, listening live or watching or listening back can really understand that. The importance of your work, not just for sales, but for all of those other byproducts as well that you speak about there. I'm a bit cheeky, Eloise. I like to end on a bit of a cheeky question.
Of course.
So it might rile you up a little bit. So here we go. What are your top 3 content copywriting icks? What are the things that make your skin crawl?
Oh, how much time do you have? So firstly, any sales email that starts with I, get in the sea. I just have no time for you. It's already an immediate, not today, Satan. The next one is telling me that something is so aesthetic. And that's very specific, right? That's very niche, because we have, and you know what, I get it. Language evolves. I'm not saying that language can't change. And actually my third ick is related to this. But I think for some reason, having an influencer tell me that something is so aesthetic, it really grinds my gears, because an aesthetic is not a noun necessarily. I mean, you can say it is a certain kind of aesthetic, certainly, and then it is a noun in that sense. But saying that it's an adjective, and that like, oh, it's so aesthetic, it's not. That's not the thing. It can be aesthetically pleasing. Sorry, yeah, it really frustrates me. And then 2, so you get a bonus one. The next one is the phrase valued customer.
Ooh, okay.
Where my name should go. LinkedIn, I'm calling you out right now. You're really bad for this. If someone says, valued customer, tell us your thoughts and feedback. I hate you, because it's an oxymoron. If you're telling me that I'm a valued customer and you don't know my name, I know you don't value me. Get it sorted. Get it sorted. The last one, what was she going to rant about? The last one, and it was such a good one too.
Well, even those alone are...
Those alone, yeah. It'll come back to me. Wait for the bonus episode, folks, where Eloise goes off on one.
Maybe Eloise, you can add it in as a comment when it comes to mind when we officially publish this. Thank you so much. We could have easily gone on for 2 hours, and I'll definitely try and book you in for 2025 as well, Eloise, and we'll go deeper into a specific area. Where can people do business with you?
Oh, wonderful. Well, here on LinkedIn, if you are on LinkedIn, Eloise Leeson-Smith, I would love to hear from you. Any copy rants, content conversations, slide in the DMs. You're very welcome. Otherwise, you can find me on my website, which is olimcomms.com. So that's comms as in communication, olimcomms.com. And again, all rants and issues and concerns welcome. If you are a brand who is evolving and you would like to understand how your customers really see you, and to let that be your guiding light for the rest of your, your communications output, it'd be fabulous to have a conversation.
Eloise, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much to everyone watching and listening too. If you've enjoyed this conversation with Eloise Leeson-Smith, please do leave a comment, whichever social you're watching this back on, and we would invite you to potentially like and subscribe if you found value from this. Thank you so much for watching another episode of A Coffee with Chris. As always, a big thanks to our sponsor, Hill Coaching Company, and our charity partner, Big C. And we'll see you this time next week for another episode of A Coffee